If I showed you this photo of a guitar, if you know your guitars, then without hesitating, I'm sure you can tell me exactly what brand it is. The sculpted body, the striking flames and quilting in the maple top, and of course the birds and the inlays all point this guitar to one brand and one brand only, and that is PRS. Paul Reed Smith, or PRS Guitars for short, have not exactly been going for a massively long time. They were only founded in about 1985, but still they've carved out their own unique legacy within the industry. With their unique style and their guitars that are built absolutely flawlessly, no matter what price point you buy at. They're so versatile as well, with tonal options and performance appointments on board that suit vintage players and modern players alike. There aren't many brands out there whose guitars span quite as many genres as PRS, a lot of that being on the same model of guitar. However, as with a lot of guitar brands, there's quite a lot of options. It can be quite daunting looking in from the outside, trying to decipher what's what and which one is right for you, with so many different options at different price points. Is it worth saving up for something fancier? Will an SE guitar do? What even is an SE guitar? What's a core guitar? What's a wood library? And given that the paper in books is made from wood, doesn't that make all libraries wood libraries? Well, in this video, I'm going to answer all of those questions, except the last one. We'll go through a little bit of the history of the company, how they started, where they are now, as well as go through their range, break down what they have to offer, uncode some of the jargon, and help you when it comes to understanding PRS guitars. So before we dive into the range as it is today, let's have a little brief look at the history of PRS, starting with the man himself, Paul Reed Smith. Paul Reed Smith was born in 1956 in Maryland, USA. Or is it Maryland? Someone let me know in the comments. He decided on his guitar building career not long after attending college. He started building guitars for different customers in the late 70s and early 80s before finally starting his own company, PRS, or Paul Reed Smith, in 1985. Initially, PRS started out as a much smaller boutique guitar company. They produced all of their guitars in their factory in Maryland, creating a line of guitars that were known as the PRS standard models. And their popularity grew from there, being played all through the 80s by big guitarists such as Carlos Santana, who even had his own Paul Reed Smith built guitar before PRS Guitars was even a company. The company built and developed into the 90s, where Paul Reed Smith sought the advice and mentorship of Ted McCartney, the former president of Gibson Guitars. He's the man behind some of the most classic Gibson guitars, such as the ES335, the Explorer, and the Flying V. They collaborated together, and this is where they designed the McCartney series, which is a much more vintage-inspired run of PRS guitars that were of course inspired by the kind of guitars that Ted was making at Gibson. The McCartney series are massively popular, and they're still around even through to today. Until 2000, all of their guitars were produced in America in the same factory. Their market was generally a higher end boutique price point, with them eventually releasing something called the CE series, which was a series of bolt-on guitars made in the same factory that was slightly more affordable than their core line. However, all of that changed when PRS launched their Korean-built SE range, SE standing for Student Edition. They wanted to create guitars that were still of the PRS standard, with quality craftsmanship and great tone, but at a price that's much more accessible to the average guitarist, perhaps even a younger musician, or even a musician who's just starting out. A guitar student, if you will. hence Student Edition. This opened them up to a whole new market of players, and their popularity soared as a result. Even through to today, PRS SE series guitars are some of the most popular in the world, with the entry level and the sort of mid-range price points being extremely popular. Despite making thousands of these guitars every year, the quality of the tone and the craftsmanship is still just as strong today as it was back in 2000. So that's a brief history of PRS, which as a company has a relatively brief history itself. But the era of PRS, which of course is the most important, is the present. Because they're a relatively new company, they've sort of avoided being shackled by their history like some of their competitors have, where they're kind of forced to recreate the exact same guitars that they were making in the 50s and 60s to suit the people who still want those guitars. PRS can innovate. They can employ modern techniques to their guitars because people aren't demanding the same vintage guitars over and over. Because they don't have that kind of legacy in the past, they don't have to stick to that in the present. And with that being said, let's go through what they have to offer in the present day. So as we've already discussed, PRS have a few different tiers now when it comes to price point and quality of the instruments. If you've watched a lot of our Understanding brand videos in the past, this is pretty normal by now. Their entry level, as I've already mentioned, is the SE range. The Student Edition guitars are designed to be affordable and accessible to a wide range of different musicians, not just beginners or students. I mean, let's face it, all of us are in the market for a decent sounding, well-built guitar that doesn't break the bank, and the SE range really delivers on that. I mean, it's the reason they've become so popular, because they're really good guitars. The SE range are all built in the Far East. Originally it was just Korea, but now I believe they've moved their production to Indonesia. That's not really important, but what is important is the price. They start around the £300 mark for their entry-level model and go all the way up to the kind of upper echelons of three figures. We're talking about £800 as the ceiling for the SE range. Next up, we have a relatively new series of guitars for PRS, which is known as the S2 series. S2 stands for Stensonville 2, which is the second department that they opened up in the same Stensonville factory in Maryland, USA. They've taken the similar craftsmanship and quality of their other American-made guitars, but they brought it in at a bit more of an affordable price point, meaning that the S2 sits quite nicely between the SE range and the core range in terms of the price point and the quality. The S2 range has some unique models that you only really see in that range, such as the Vela, but it also has some of the classic guitars like the Custom 24, which is pretty much the original PRS guitar. They're all made in the USA. They start from about £1,300 and go to about £2,000, and they just offer you something with a little bit more craftsmanship and quality than you get from the SE series. Now, before we get to the core series, we actually have a series in between that's known as the CE series. That stands for Classic Electric, and this is where all of PRS's bolt-on guitars live. Bolt-on meaning the neck is bolted on to the body, much like a Fender guitar would be, rather than it being a slightly kind of more expensive set neck process, which you get from Gibson guitars. This series includes the likes of John Mayer's Silver Sky range, as well as Mark Lettieri's brand new Fiore range, which was released earlier this year. They also have some bolt-on versions of their standard guitars, such as the CE24, which is just a bolt-on version of the Custom 24. The bolt-on neck construction makes them a little bit more affordable to produce, so as such they just slip in just underneath the price that you would get for standard core range models. They're around £2,000 to £2,500 max. Next up, as we've discussed already, you have the core series. This is the same line of guitars that Paul Reed Smith was making back in 1985 when he launched the company. It's the highest level of quality that you can get from a standard PRS guitar, and they're designed for serious enthusiasts, professionals and collectors alike. They're certainly not cheap though. They come in well over £3,000 as an average for a standard model. But you certainly get what you pay for in terms of the quality and the feel, as well as the sound and the looks. Lastly, you have a tier above this that's known as private stock. Now essentially, this is PRS's custom shop. It's the best of the best. The very best woods and electronics are chosen. It's made by the very best craftsmen in the business with the utmost care and precision, and every guitar is considered to be a one-off. They're all exclusively built to order. They offer you a massive amount of customization, and they're not only the best guitars that PRS make, they might be some of the best quality guitars you can get on the market anywhere. Of course, they're extremely exclusive. I mean, we've had a few here in our time, but certainly not at the moment. So if you get a chance to go and play a PRS private stock, absolutely do it and consider yourself privileged. Okay, so that was a little bit about the tiers of guitars that PRS offer, but before we talk about the specific guitars in those tiers, let's first talk about the wood. Now, if you've been poking your nose around a few different PRS guitars before watching this video, you might have come across the term wood library. But what is that? Well, in the factory in Maryland, they have a little corner that is absolutely full of different types of woods. Extremely high quality woods. In fact, only some of the very best they have to offer. They have everything from maple to mahogany, koa, all kinds of different high quality choice woods. Within the core series, dealers like us at GAC have the option to order wood library versions of these, where we get to pick everything. We can choose our own exact tops, we can choose our own piece of wood that the neck is made from, absolutely everything. What's great about this is that dealers can pick their own tops. They can think about what their customers would want, they can look through the different patterns and the graining on all the different woods and choose the specific pieces that they can have on the wall in their shop. The private stock has got its own hidden vault of wood, again, where they reserve only the absolute very best pieces for all private stock guitars. And lastly, on wood, before we talk about the different guitar types, is how PRS grade their wood. It really sets PRS apart from their rivals, and it's great to see, especially on the maple tops, for example. Have you ever gone to buy a guitar with a figured or flamed maple top, and when it actually arrives and you open it, the figuring and the flaming is nowhere near as vibrant or as even as it was in the photos on the website? Having worked in the sales department here, I know it happens all the time, and I don't blame people for being a bit disappointed. Well, PRS set out to solve this, particularly on their more expensive guitars, by creating this grading system when it comes to the maple. So it goes like this. First up, you've got regular. Sometimes they're referred to as non-10 tops. We'll get into 10 tops in a second. This is the bog standard line of wood that you'll see on their kind of standard core series guitars. They're still really nice pieces of wood, but there'll be slight irregularities in the flaming. It won't maybe be as vibrant all the way across the wood. Next up, you have what are known as 10 tops. Now, if you're buying a PRS guitar with a 10 top, it's normally an extremely premium model, and the wood reflects that. It will be even and consistent throughout. You'll have a nice vibrant flame that's nice and even all the way down. They call it a 10 top because they rate all of the pieces of wood on a scale of 1 to 10. 6 or 7 is normally the standard line, but all of the 10 tops are of course, well, graded 10. Above a 10 top, you have all of the wood that they select for their wood library, as well as for artists and things like that, as well as above that, having all the wood that's graded as private stock wood, which is, I mean, for the sake of argument, let's call it 1 in a million. But nevertheless, with this grading system, it shows that PRS really care about the quality of the product that they make and the quality of the product that you get at the other end. Okay, so now all of that is covered, let's talk about the type of guitars that PRS make. So firstly, we have the classic. Their smash hit, as it were. This is the Custom 24. This was the original PRS guitar that was launched at Winter NAMM in 1985. It's called Custom 24 because it's got 24 frets, and it comes complete with PRS's own design humbuckers, as well as a single tone and volume knob and a 5-way pickup selector. It splits the coils and the humbuckers and gives you loads of different options for tone. As you can imagine, this guitar is available at pretty much every price point that PRS have. There's a couple of variants of this guitar, such as the 2408, which adds advanced switching options, which really is a fantastic guitar, particularly at the SE range, as well as things like the Custom 22, which has 22 frets instead of 24. You can also get the Custom 24 Floyd or the Custom 24 Piezo, which add a double locking Floyd Rose tremolo and piezo pickups respectively. The bass level guitar in the SE series is the 245. It comes with 245S pickups from PRS and is a perfect guitar for beginners. It's styled in a similar way to some of the other guitars we're going to talk about in a second, but it's of course a much more affordable price point. Next, let's revisit the Ted McCarty collaboration that we discussed earlier in this video and talk about the range of guitars you can get from that. They're available at pretty much every price point, apart from the SE range, but the SE range does have models that have very, very similar features and appointments to the McCarty series. Given that Ted McCarty came from Gibson, these guitars have some of the regular features that you would expect from a classic Gibson guitar. Things like dual humbuckers, as well as 3-way pickup selectors, and stop tail bridges, just like you'd see on a Les Paul. The main models you have are the McCarty, which is a non-stop tail bridge guitar, and it has a single volume and tone control. You can also get the McCarty 594. This includes a stop tail bridge as well as an extra tone and volume control, making the electronics very similar to that of a Les Paul. You can also get the McCarty 594 as a hollow body, and you can also get it with a single cut body shape, which is just a single cut body version of the same guitar. Moving outside of the McCarty range, you can get regular PRS guitars as hollow bodies as well. You have the Hollowbody 2, which, as the name suggests, is a hollow body guitar that comes with either humbuckers or piezo pickups. exclusive guitar to the S2 series you have is called the Vela, which is essentially an offset shape that is ultra playable and has just a different aesthetic to your standard PRS guitars. It comes with a gloss finish, a satin finish, it comes hollow body, you name it. The SE series does have equivalents to this, which is known as the Starler and the Mirror. They're a bit similar to the Vela in that they're non-maple caps, they're a little bit vintage inspired and generally a bit more playable. Outside of these standard models, you also have a couple of special models and artist signature models. You can get models such as the PRS Special Semi-Hollow, which luckily we have with us today, as well as things like the PRS Studio. There's the 509, and there's also Paul's guitar. Paul's guitar is literally a guitar that Paul designed for himself with all of the features and appointments that he wanted. So if you want to play like Paul, get that one. Another thing to clear up is that you can often see standard models of particular guitars. They're pretty much the same guitar, but they just don't have a flamed maple or figured maple top. Outside of the main guitars, as well as those special guitars, you also have a lot of artist signature models. This includes the likes of Zach Myers, Mark Tremonti, Mark Littieri, Dusty Waring, and that's just to name a few. And famously, of course, recently, the most famous artist signature model has to be the John Mayer Silver Sky. It was designed in collaboration with John Mayer, taking all the features and appointments of his favourite 60s guitars and putting them all into one instrument. Originally, it was only available at the American price point, but recently they just launched the Silver Sky SE series, which brings the same guitar down to a much more affordable and accessible price point. Of course, it's very reminiscent of a Strat, but you don't need to be a John Mayer fan to appreciate this guitar. If you're looking for a Strat style guitar under £1,000, then the Silver Sky SE really rivals what Fender have to offer at a similar price point. And with that, we're pretty much done. I mean, there's so much more we could obviously talk about with PRS, but I think we've covered most of the main points. Plus, I think this video is going to be quite long, so let's wrap it up. PRS is a company that produces a lot of guitars that are quite similar, but they all have that PRS identity. In terms of choosing one, a lot of it comes down to what you want specifically, whether you want it to be hollow, whether you want single coils or humbuckers or piezo's. There is a massive amount of choice. You've just got to make that choice. But outside of that, no matter which PRS you buy, you know that you are getting an instrument that is built with quality and craftsmanship in mind. Whether you're buying a PRS for £300 or £3,000, you're still getting a guitar that's built with a high attention to detail, something that Paul Reed Smith has been putting into his instruments since he founded the company in 1985. Oh, and before we go, one last point to make that the PRS rep I spoke to about this video told me is that every single PRS from SE all the way up to American built, before it leaves the factory, gets a full setup by a technician. Paul Reed Smith literally employs loads of technicians who spend all day, every day, setting up every single guitar that leaves them. Part of Paul's philosophy is that he wants a guitarist to be able to pull out a PRS from its box and start playing it instantly. It just shows their commitment to delivering a high quality product no matter what the price range is. So anyway, PRS fans, where are you at? Drop a comment below and show some love for an amazing company. Alternatively, if you have a question about choosing a PRS guitar that maybe wasn't covered in the video, then leave it down below. Or if you have any advice for anyone choosing a PRS, leave that down below. Let's just help each other out. But thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe to see more things like this, and we will see you very soon.